All right, y'all, let's get started here. Welcome to tonight's Postgame Pint. My name is Seth Stoes of twinsdaily.com. Want to thank everyone for joining. If you're watching this later, feel free to give us some feedback, of course. Before we introduce our panels, here's a couple of things, again, for you to consider. We've got the Q&A, which I see people have already started to use. We got a couple of questions already. The chat room is open. We have a couple of questions there as well. And if you want, you can raise your hand and you can join us on. I can let you speak. And you can ask us a direct question. We will be starting here real quickly. With that, let's introduce our panel. Want to welcome first Nate Palmer. Nate, introduce yourself. Tell us what you're drinking this evening, and let's get started.
Yeah, so I'm Nate Palmer. I got to write a much better recap of last night's game because I was a little bit more away. But tonight, last time I was on, I had an animal-based beer. And this time I have, it's a Flamingo Dreams Nitro. And with some guys, someone recommended it at the local spot. So we're trying it. It's a blonde ale, kind of interesting.
Very interesting. All right, those of you in the chat room, let us know what you're drinking because, as Mr. Bonus would like to say, this is a game that can, if you don't drink, you might have to start after this one. So, Matthew Taylor, what are you up to this evening? What's your drink of choice?
Good evening. I am drinking a Guinness Baltimore Blonde. I got this over the weekend and was drinking it on my last post-game pint, and there's a couple more in the fridge, so that's what I'm going with again. It's real good.
Very good. And our third panelist tonight, Jeremy Nygard. Pretty cool. What do you got on the beverage tap this evening?
I have no beverages near me. I got an early alarm set for tomorrow, so I'm not gonna drink one because, as I've learned, one's too many and two's never enough.
Yeah, a three's just right.
Well, maybe.
With that, of course, I have the Diet Dr. Pepper again, so very exciting. I have a meeting right away at 8 o'clock tomorrow morning, so yeah. So tonight we'll talk about a game that unfortunately kind of had a pretty distinct moment where things shifted. The Twins got out to a 4-1 lead early thanks to home runs from Jorge Polanco and two from Eddie Rosario, who's now had 3 in the last 2 games. They took a 4-1 lead, but gradually the Brewers came back. Manny Pena hit 2 home runs, including a 2-run homer to tie the game in the 6th off of Trevor May. And then Taylor Rogers came in for the bottom of the 8th against their 2, 3, 4 hitters, and I'm sure we'll talk about that a little bit, but gave up a 2-run homer to Jed Jerko, and Josh Hader came on and looked pretty dominant in the 9th inning, and the Brewers won 6-4. So the Twins' 1-game winning streak is now over, and they've now lost 5 of their last 6. So where do we start? Well, let's start with Nate Palmer. What's one thing that stood out for you most in this game?
Well, I'm going to go for the low-hanging fruit here. When are we done bringing Rogers back off of no rest? It's been clear since last season that doesn't work. And how much longer can we just run this bullpen out? It seems like maybe our luck has ran out with leaning this much on. As good as this bullpen can be, it looks like our time may have ran out, and it's time to start reevaluating some of this a little bit.
So, Nate, you bring up a good question, and it's one that we talked about a lot, either on this podcast or around Twitter or, even in the press conferences. Matthew, let's add your thoughts because as of yesterday, before the game in Milwaukee, we were talking about how Rogers and Romo and May and Duffy hadn't been used enough in that 4-game losing streak. And now we're talking about using them too much after 2 games. So what are your thoughts on the bullpen usage tonight, which is tough because Tyler Clippard started. It was a bullpen game.
Yeah, it was tough. And for a lot of the game, I thought the bullpen looked really good. I thought Clippard, he gave up the first home run, but otherwise I thought he looked really solid, was giving up really weak contact. I thought Stashak had the best start of the season so far. He was electric. He had like 6 whiffs and 12 pitches, 10 strikes, 3 strikeouts. He was unbelievable. His slider was just getting movement that you rarely ever see. And then, right away from who was the next reliever that came in?
Whistler came in.
Yeah, I thought
2
Whistler looked really good with his first 2 innings, and he had quick work and was looking solid. I was a little surprised that Baldelli brought him out for a 3rd inning. It made sense because he worked through the first 2 pretty quickly, but still, when so many other guys in the bullpen, I would have liked to see Alcala there, but you can see why he would have brought back Whistler again. And then, yeah, it was the bigger names of the bullpen that struggled tonight. I don't necessarily worry too much about it. I think you're going to ride with May. You're going to ride with Rogers. You're going to ride with Duffy all season. There's going to be games that are tougher than others, but I don't think that you need to make any changes too big. They're going to be your guys. They're going to be awesome. They're going to put up numbers, and you just ride with games like this that unfortunately are going to happen.
Yeah, I mean, all relievers struggle except apparently Tyler Duffy, who just never gets, anything done against him. But Jeremy, this is a point that was brought up quite a bit the last couple of years. Taylor Rogers has been as good as anyone in baseball out of the bullpen the last couple of years, except when used on back-to-back nights at times, as Nate mentioned already. I mean, is that a concern for you, or are you the type that would say, hey, they got 2, 3, 4 coming up? Yelich just happened to beat the shift and got beat on a pitch, and then one mistake to Jerko later, and he's lost it. So where do you stand on the Rogers on days in a row?
The thing that was weird to me, I don't think was necessarily the back-to-back. It was the bringing him in the 8th. Like, if he's your closer, which he is, if the Twins take the lead in the 9th, you want him in the bottom of the 9th. So why bring him in the 8th? Yeah, the back-to-back games has been an issue for him. It just seemed like a curious place to use him. Sticking along with the bullpen theme, Stashak was really good, hardly threw any pitches. He gets 1 inning. Duffy was really good, hardly threw any pitches. He gets 1 inning. Matt Whistler gets 2 2/3 with almost 40 pitches, and the 2 really long guys in the bullpen, Alcala and Thorpe, get 0 in a bullpen game. So does that mean, like, I get the not using Thorpe. He hasn't been great. Alcala, I thought for sure was in line for multiple innings, especially given who was used last night. So I guess I'm just at the point where I don't really know what's going on with the bullpen. If they close the game out today and they win, I don't have any questions. But that's not what happened, and it just seemed like a curious way to patchwork 9 innings, well, in this case, 8 innings in a bullpen game when you have games tomorrow.
Nate, let's bring this back to you because you started the topic, and we'll continue it as we go here. But, I mean, my thought is, why wouldn't you go with Rogers there? Rocco Baldelli said earlier in the year, as much as he's, the closer, he's the guy that he says they're going to use in the toughest situations. And in a tie game with, with Hura, I don't even know how to say that, Keston Hura, Christian Yelich, and then their number 4 hitter was Jerko. I think that's an ideal situation for Rogers. And then you figure out the 9th if you accidentally are still going there. Maybe it's Romo because he hadn't pitched yet, or hopefully not Corey Guerin. But Nate, feel free to continue on that topic since it was yours.
Yeah, I didn't have a problem with Rogers. In fact, that seems like to be what a lot of people wanted to see last night, was Rogers to come in that situation. And last night we saw Romo instead, and we saw Hira take him deep. And so if you think of Rogers, as you're saying, Seth, as kind of that best guy, your fireman, that's where you want him. The question, though, is does he have the ability to bounce back after, pitching last night and then doing it again and do it as effectively as we expect him to do? Kind of hard to see. I know if you go Google my name, Taylor Rogers, and Andrew Miller somewhere, I know I've written things along the lines of saying that I thought Taylor Rogers would be Andrew Miller in a lot of ways for the Twins. And this was a couple of years ago or last year sometime. But it just seems maybe that can be the case, but there's got to be that rest in between. My concern with this at this point comes more of just, can we keep doing these short starts from our starters or these bullpen games? Is that really, I don't know if I have a whole lot of issues with exactly how the bullpen has been used kind of inning by inning, but just overall, is it going to really catch up with us in a hurry? Is it going to catch up with the team in a hurry as things come along here?
Well, it certainly could, and I thought maybe we'd see Smeltzer for a few innings since he started quite a while back. Thorpe, as long as he's on the roster, that means he must be healthy, and he might as well be used in this type of situation. But I don't know. We can move on from the bullpen conversation, and I agree with you. It'll be great if they get Homer Bailey and Rich Hill back in the near future, but we'll see if that happens because nobody wants to use an opener. It's just they've kind of been forced to do this right now. Real quick before we get to Matthew Taylor's topic of the game, just a reminder, we've got the Q&A, which we will get to your questions. We've got the chat room, which we will get to your questions. Again, Taylor Rogers coming in for a second straight game. I think he's done that already a couple times this year. So to me, that wasn't a huge deal. It just obviously didn't go well tonight. So again, Matthew Taylor, go ahead with your topic of the game that you want to cover.
Yeah, it was once again another similar game in which the offense struck early and then completely went silent the rest of the game. I think today was different in which they didn't go completely silent. Yesterday, after getting off to a hot start, they were like 10, or they got out like 10 of their next 11 batters. Today, they were continuing to get hits, but just not being able to push anything across the plate, which it is turning into a theme that the team is racing out to, quick starts and getting runs in the first, second, third inning, and then just going quiet. And we saw the same thing again today after Rosario's second home run in the third inning. Then we didn't push anything across the plate again. We had opportunities in the fourth inning. We had runners at first and third with 2 outs, and Cruz struck out. In the sixth inning, we had runners on first and second with no outs. And then that was followed up by a Kepler strikeout and then Polanco hitting into a double play. So it's just continuing to be a trend of not being able to build on these early leads, which we talked about the bullpen, and sure, the bullpen didn't have the best game, but you would also like to see your offense give a little bit more support where you don't need the bullpen to be perfect the rest of the way. They could give up a couple runs here and there and be okay. It is getting to be a little odd that way. And then also, I guess, just with the offense, I think the other part is just your stars continuing to struggle with Arise, Sano, and Garver. Was a really ugly game for all three of those guys. Sano did get 1 hit, but otherwise just another ugly game from 3 struggling stars.
Let me unmute myself. 1+7 Pro in the Q&A says, pathetic offense after the big home run by Rosie. What's wrong? And like you said, Matthew, that has been the theme all year. They've had a lot of big innings and then done nothing with it beyond that. Jeremy, your thoughts on the offense, or just kind of that situation where they're getting the home runs, they're just not able to get anything going later? Jeremy did mute himself, but we can't hear him.
Yeah, so the thing with the offense, I mean, they got 4 runs, mostly early, but how many games are you going to win when your pitching staff gives up 4 home runs? Like, yes, 6 runs. But that's the thing. Like, you can put as much as you want on the offense, which hasn't been great, but to come back and say the offense needs to do more, well, when the pitchers give up 4 bombs, you're going to lose games, and that's just the long and the short of how that works. It doesn't matter who gives it up. It doesn't matter when the Twins, fail to score later in the games. Their offense was fine. Buxton had 3 hits. He looked way better than last night. The 3 dudes that were mentioned earlier that just aren't getting it done, bad at bats mostly, but Sano had a hit. Garver had a hit. Arise has looked bad, but do we know if he's healthy? Makes you wonder when they add another utility type player to their roster. But I'm not going to put too much on the offense. Yeah, they failed to get the big hits late in the game, but had opportunities, had 2-out hits, just did not get runs with guys in scoring position.
All right, Jeremy, we're going to stick with you, and then we'll get to Nate as the follow-up here. But your thought from the game, you brought up a few things there. Let's hear what you got.
Yes. So I guess my thought was it's fun to watch Buxton on the base paths. Whether that's going first to third, that's an element that will be a positive if he can continue to do it. We've seen him hit for some power. We saw a bad game last night, but if he can continue to make a difference, that's going to help a struggling offense because his ability to do different things than the other guys in the lineup can offer.
Yeah, and we keep hearing that he shouldn't hit the ball on the ground, even though a lot of the old school is hit the ball on the ground and run. Tonight you saw why hit the ball on the ground and run sometimes can be a good thing. He had 2 infield hits, and then he had a nice solid single as well. Nate, your thoughts on Buxton and what you've seen from him over the last 5 or 6 games?
Yeah, coming in before kind of things started going south in that game, my whole thought was to talk offense and how things looked like they're heading in the right direction. And I mean, those 3 hits, even though 2 are infield hits, and seeing Buxton run, that's just amazing. I know Paul on Twitter, in response to the initial post of this, was just asking, would we be happy if Buxton played in 40 games and hit 210? And I think even though he's hitting more than 210 right now, we're seeing those glimpses that even, it's just that minimal bit of offense. He doesn't have to always be jacking home runs like he has, even though that's been fun. Just him on the bases causes havoc, him being in the field cleans things up. And we've been saying this for years, that even a bad Buxton is a very good asset to a winning baseball team. And we're seeing that as he's been able to stay on the field so far this season. And hopefully I didn't just jinx that by saying that.
I'd add that I think that we'd be okay if he hit 210 and played 40-plus games. But I think what we've seen from him over the last couple of years is when he has been healthy, he is a much better player than that. So that's really encouraging, and hopefully he can stay on the field. Matthew, your thoughts on Buxton and the improvements you've seen? I'm going to add in another question. Do you think if he wouldn't have tried to jump with 2 feet, he might have had a chance for that ball in the 9th inning?
Yeah, I was going to say the same thing. I did think so, but just glad again that he came out of the game healthy. Every time you see a ball, you see him running towards the wall, your breath stops a little bit. Same with just running down or running out first base, or infield singles. Sorry, you just hold your breath every time hoping that he's going to be healthy. And I think it's going to be like that all year. But I mean, if he stays healthy, he's the most exciting person in the lineup for sure. And probably the most valuable person in this lineup. He just does everything so well. You can just tell that there's some baseball players that you look at them and you're just like, yeah, you were born to play the game of baseball. And when you see Byron Buxton running out singles, stealing, going first to third, running to the wall, he's just a guy who's bred to play the game of baseball. And it's just a blast to see him healthy and having fun again.
Well, I mentioned to you guys before a little pre-production question that I'd try to be prepared with a couple of lightning round types of questions. I'm going to throw one of those at you because in the chat room, Mike Link asks, the obvious question is, don't we have a starter in St. Paul or somewhere so we can stop these bullpen games? And so I pulled up the list from the Twins press notes before the game. And so the pitchers that they have in St. Paul right now are Dakota Chalmers, Sam Clay, who is on the taxi squad, Edouard Colina, Danny Coboom, who I think is also, is he on the trip? And then Joan Duran, Ryan Garten, and they just added Casey Lawrence as well. Of that group, which of those players would you most want to see and like realistically think would be a guy that made sense to call up? I'm going to start with Jeremy on this one.
Duran's the easy answer for me. Not because he really fits the need of what they have. I don't think he'd be ready to step in and be a starter, but if they want to patchwork things together with their 25 or 28 man roster and use guys for an inning or two, he's got the arsenal that he could have success as a bullpen arm and still be a long-term starter, in my opinion.
Yeah, and I think this year, being as weird as it is and no minor leagues to really go back to and continue that development process makes a lot of sense. How about for you, Nate?
Duran was the name that popped off too for me. I guess I'll go number 2 would be Chalmers. That I'd be interested in seeing what's in there. I mean, it's that hard thing. We don't know what they're doing, but I would think Duran has to be the one for a lot of the same reasons Jeremy brought up.
All right, Matthew?
Yep, Duran for me. I'll keep it short. The other guys hit the main points.
All right. Well, I think it then is appropriate for me to say at twinsdaily.com, Patrick Wozniak tonight posted an article called, "Is it time for Joan Duran?" I will actually agree with that to some degree. If you really want a starter, why not Duran or Chalmers? That would also be fine. But if you're going to go with a reliever, I'm really curious to see what Edouard Colina could do out of the bullpen for an extended period of time as well. I'm going to, again, continue to encourage people to use the Q&A button if you'd like, or the chat room, and we'll be sure to try to answer those questions as well. In the Q&A, so the question from John comes, and I guess I should have prefaced this, who in the world do we have relief pitcher-wise in St. Paul if anyone goes down or needs extended rest, especially if we are going and signing someone like Guerin and bringing him right up to the 28-man. Now, Guerin, I think he was on the 60-man all along. They did just add Casey Lawrence, another 32 or so year old veteran of some major league time. But of that group, I mentioned Colina. Is there someone else that you think in a short term would be better than the guys that they have right now? Let's start with Matthew on this one.
No, I think Duran, if you're not going to bring him up as a starter, you could bring him up as a reliever for sure. And I think in an inning or two with the velocity and the stuff that he has, I think he would be a really good reliever. But I do think the Twins have a lot of relief depth right now. We didn't see Jorge Alcala pitch today. He has shown that he has this stuff as well. Thielbar is a solid lefty reliever who I think I'd be interested to see him throw a couple more innings just to see what he has. And, we didn't see Romo pitch today, so the Twins still have a lot of relief depth. I don't think we need to worry too much about how much relief depth there is or who we need to bring up. I think the starting pitching is definitely a thing. We also have Zach Littell, who it sounds like he's close to coming back as well. So I'm not too concerned with the depth in our bullpen. I'm more concerned about the depth of our utility men and the depth of our starters than anything else.
All right, this one I'm going to use as kind of a medium range lightning round, but feel free to add a little bit. I thought it's been brought up already. I thought the turning point of the game was the Max Kepler at bat in the 6th. They had runners on first and second, nobody out, and he took what should have been a 4 or 5 pitch walk. A couple of those pitches were probably a little closer than what they looked like on the FSN box, but clearly they weren't all strikes, and he got called the strikeout. Leaves it first and second, 1 out now, and Polanco grounds into the double play immediately the next half inning. The Brewers tie it up. I mean, obviously none of those things are necessarily tied to each other, and with no crowd adrenaline pushing things, probably not directly related, but I thought that was the turning point of the game. So with that, Travis Z asks in the Q&A, was this a great game for an example for robo-umps? And we'll let Nate give his quick 30-second thoughts on electronic strike zones, at least.
I don't want to say this, but it definitely was a check to the let's do it for sure. I'm just hoping, because we saw it in Kansas City too. I'm hoping that umps behind the plate are having the same issue that batters are having, that there's just everyone's trying to get used to seeing the ball again. But it definitely was a check towards, let's do it.
All right, we do have a question, and I'm going to have someone allowed to talk here in just a minute, but I want Matthew and Jeremy to quick give their robo-ump or electronic strike zone answers. Go ahead, Matthew.
Yeah, if you have the technology and the ability to get the right call, why wouldn't you do it? It seems like the easiest thing in the world and doesn't make much sense to me why you wouldn't have that.
Jeremy, you going to give a counter opinion here?
Well, yeah, I don't know that robot umps are the solution maybe to the problem. I think they could be used to help make it better. I think originally my idea was that umps need to wear some sort of device that when they screw up, a little bit, it buzzes a little bit, but when they screw up really poorly, it needs to hurt. Because that would be entertaining for us watching on TV. There was a lot of borderline calls that went both ways. Polanco, I think it was Polanco late in the game. There was one that Morris just kind of exhaled, and Bramer said we might as well flip a coin. But there was 2 pitches before that there was a pitch in the zone that wasn't called a strike. I flipped through Twitter pretty consistently throughout the game, waiting for someone to make a comment about the Packers getting all the calls. And I never saw that. So maybe it felt worse than it actually was, because it really seemed like he did a poor job behind the plate. But I do think that, like you said, that was the turning point. But there were bad calls that helped elongate some at bats for the Twins as well. Is there a way to
Jeremy, right in the 9th inning? Go ahead.
If there's just a way to blend the two, like a challenge, like in tennis, you get the Hawkeye challenge. If a batter could challenge the location, if they could one challenge an inning or something like that, that wouldn't slow the game down. But to go full robots, I think would be difficult.
Yeah, I tend to agree. And I was going to point out that I think Taylor Rogers got a second strike to go up 0-2 on Christian Yelich. That definitely wasn't a strike. Of course, then Yelich said something to Jerry Meals behind the plate, and the next 2 pitches probably could have been called strikes and weren't. So I agree. I think it was both ways for sure. So we're going to bring in a person who wants to ask a question. It might be for Jeremy. It might be for me. I don't know what's going to happen, and I don't know what's going to happen when I click allow to talk. So please be kind. Remember, this is a G or PG rated show. And let's bring in Joaquin. You got a question, sir? You're going to have to unmute, though. There we go.
All right. Can you hear me, guys?
We got you.
What's up, guys?
How we doing? Everything good out west?
Absolutely. I'm just watching Tatis Jr. put on his.
Well, we're losing you in terms of reception.
I'm sorry. I'm just watching my Padres. How are you guys?
I mean, we were just watching the Twins lose their 5th game in 6 games. But, yeah, that junior guy's pretty good.
Yeah. Was Mitch in the lineup tonight or not? I didn't watch.
He was. I believe he had a hit as well.
All right. So we need to keep him back in there. Steven's best man, Mitch, is a good guy. Need to keep him in there.
Absolutely. You got to stick by him. Everything else good? Steven's doing well with the Red Sox now?
He is. He's I think he's finally caught up after that little episode with the Mets, really not doing anything. And then he got picked up by the Red Sox and then had to pass COVID test and do his bullpens and finally got to do a couple of live BP. So now he's ready to go. So hopefully feels good. He's ready to go. So hopefully he gets called up soon.
That would be fantastic. The Red Sox can use some pitching. Hey, frankly, right now the Twins might need some pitching. So good to talk to you. Wish him well for us, and obviously his lovely bride. I'm sure Jeremy's got something to say real quick, but obviously they've got a lot of exciting things coming in their near future.
Yes, they do.
Joaquin, I was just going to congratulate you. You're going to be a granddaddy.
Yes. Yes, I'm a little younger than I thought that would happen, but I guess 56 is a new granddad. I still have his dog Jet here with me that got left behind, so I'm practicing with Jet.
There you go. All right, well, we're going to let you go, but thanks for listening. Obviously, good to talk to you always, and best wishes to your family, including Steven.
Absolutely. I'm still a big fan of you guys. I really always appreciate what you guys did and do for the minor leaguers, the unsung heroes, and you always have a place in my and my wife's heart. You guys always treated us well, and always a success for all the minor leaguers, and you guys do a great job. And whenever I go there, I know I have a place to or someone to call and hang out with. Thanks, guys.
No question. And I think Jeremy and I are now looking to booking flights to San Diego because we're going to need a place to stay too. So good to talk to you. Thanks again.
All right, guys. Keep up the good work.
Thank you. All right. Again, that was Joaquin Gonzalez, the father of Steven Gonzalez, who is with the Boston Red Sox right now, I believe, on the 60-player pool. So, again, if anyone else has questions, please feel free to ask in the chat room. We'll go for a few more minutes here. Mentioning the COVID situation when a player adds a player, or when a team adds a player. The Twins added a player today, and we should really talk about that. They added infielder give me a second here. Ildemaro Vargas, a infielder he spent parts of the last 4 years with the Diamondbacks. Rocco Baldelli said before the game he came very highly recommended by people, including Eduardo Escobar. And certainly Mike Bell knows him as well as anyone. So he's going to have to be on the roster. But obviously the questions as far as how they get him here safely on a commercial flight, the rapid testing needed and all of that. I know I added that into the story I wrote at Twins Daily earlier today. So Jeremy, I guess I want to get your thoughts a little bit on what this means. I think you kind of alluded to what you think it may or may not mean. But how does this affect the roster in your eyes?
I think getting him on the 28th is going to be pretty easy because they'll send Thorpe down. But to me, the first thoughts that went through my mind when I saw the email was, is Donaldson going to be out for a long time? Is Arise not right? Is Marwin going to be more of an everyday guy that's going to not allow him to be a utility dude? Because the utility depth, it's not super concerning to me, but at the same time, when Marwin Gonzalez is playing every day, Adrian's is playing almost every day, Arise has been dinged up a little bit, Donaldson's out, Sano hasn't been very good. Is it more than just adding a body? Because he's been anybody that's a utility guy becomes redundant when there's already two other dudes just like you. So that to me was the kind of weird thing. Obviously, there's going to be at bats for him. I'm just curious where in the field it's going to be. You muted, Seth. Unmute.
Realize that. I get a little note that says you were muted about 4 seconds into talking, so I apologize again, everyone. Yeah, he's played first, second, third, and short for the Diamondbacks. He's played some left field. But like Jeremy, my first thought was, okay, there's going to be another move coming with this that we don't want to hear, whether it was a rise or, in my mind, maybe Donaldson was going to do something and opt out or have a surgery or something. I mean, those are the things that go through your head, even if they're not real. But and then, of course, the pregame press conference was about 15 minutes later than its scheduled start, which makes you think even more. So, Nate, your thoughts on adding Vargas and what it might mean to the Twins?
I thought it looked like one of those perfect kind of Salvi Levine moves where they just go and they pluck a guy that no one's thinking of that might come in and just be able to do enough to, as we talked about, we've got all these kind of holes that are starting to develop or just these weak spots that are coming. I think one of the big things, from the right-hand side, he had some pretty good splits. Is that what I remember reading was his right-hand side? His OPS was like 800 something. So you think if they feel like Arise needs to sit some days against the lefty, you can throw him in there. If Sano needs to sit more, you're able to move some guys around. But I don't know if he could turn into a story like an Escobar or at a lower level, even A-Ray, with kind of the ability they've been able to come in and show stuff that no one thought. And it's cash. It's not like they gave up much. They just sent some money down there. So it looks like it could it's a low risk move, if nothing else, from just a prospect standpoint.
Yeah, definitely not a big move. He had just been DFA'd on Thursday by the Diamondbacks, so it wasn't going to cost him a lot. One thing I thought interesting, and Matthew will get your thoughts on it, they have down in St. Paul at the alternate facility, they have Wilfredo Tovar and Jack Reinheimer and Drew Magee, and it tells me that, we still don't know anything about Nick Gordon. I don't think he's been cleared yet. but also Royce Lewis and Travis Blankenhorn tells me they probably don't want to bring them up this year anyway. So, Matthew, your thoughts?
Yeah, that's kind of what I was going to say too. It just alluded to potentially the other guys in St. Paul not being ready. Alludes to the Nick Gordon COVID diagnosis was really a bummer for him. I thought a 60-game season would have been perfect for Gordon to come up and finally show, what he has. He made some strides last year in AAA and put up a decent batting average and some decent defensive numbers there. So bummer for him, and also for Williams Astudillo too. You would assume that he would be the other utility man that would come up, but I'm excited for a new guy to come up, and with history under Mike Bell, knowing kind of what's there and what he was potentially starting to unlock last year. And he had some really good numbers in AAA. Tom Froming at Twins Daily said that he had an 835 OPS in more than 300 career games in AAA. So there is a little bit of a ceiling there, and seems like if you could unlock a little bit of that, playing him a couple days a week, sure.
We have just a
Can I
couple.
just add?
Go ahead.
So the other thing too that should be brought up, because I talked about redundancy with Gonzalez and Adrianza. In any other year, you can't really stash a guy on your big league roster for the next year without using a pretty precious spot. Those guys are both going to be free agents, and this new guy has a little over a year of service time. So in the event that he can make it on the 28-man roster throughout the year, the 40-man spots, Gonzalez and Adrianza will be vacated, and then if he's the utility guy or at least an option going in, you don't really have to find a roster spot for him because there's expanded rosters. So maybe a roll of the dice that can pay dividends a year and a half down the road, which you could never do in any other season just because of the roster restrictions.
Absolutely a great point. And it's definitely sounded like it from the quotes, which of course that's what they're going to tell you the day they acquire a guy. They think he's got some upside, even though he's already 29. He has done some things and can do some things, and he can hit a little bit, even though he hasn't in the big leagues. And I think it's an interesting ad. Like you said, Gonzalez and Adrianza are both free agents at the end of the year. We'll do these two last comments, and the one from Mike Link in the chat room is a comment. I would rather see Rooker, Kirilloff, Larnach to come in and give Sano some relief rather than another utility guy. My opinion is this is just completely separate of that. It's an opportunity to add a player that they don't really have to give up much for. But yeah, I mean, all of it. One of my other quick questions, we'll go starting with Nate. Who's the one guy in St. Paul that you would most want to see come up and, be asked to contribute a little bit in some way to the Twins?
Well, I'll go with one of the names Mike mentioned. And Kirilloff, I got to see him just a couple times in person. He just looks ready physically. And so it would just be fun. There's a lot of realisticness just with roster management that makes that maybe a little bit harder, I think. But with what we got with Vargas, you cut him and that's it. You don't have to really worry about anything. But I'd love to see him get some hacks just to see what happens.
Matthew, who's the player you'd want to most see from St. Paul?
Yeah, I think for me it would be Brent Rooker. I think to be able to have a right-handed bat that can play corner outfield would be nice. We have Jake Cave and Lamont Wade there now, who are both lefties, in addition to Rosario and Kepler, who are both lefties. So to be able to have a right-handed bat that can play corner outfield would be nice. And I think he's probably the most major league ready of all of them, just with the most AAA experience. So I think he would probably take less time to adapt to major league pitching. So I think it would be interesting to bring Rooker up. I don't know that now there's necessarily too much of a need. You're not going to drop Cave down. So I don't know. It's hard. I think save for an injury, there's probably not a need to call up any of those guys right now, but just with how the season's been going, it's probably going to happen at some point.
Jeremy, your thoughts?
Yeah, kind of the opposite of what Matthew thinks. I think if you can get a giveaway for Cruz and Sano to take a day off and get a left-handed bat in there, that would be, to me, the most beneficial thing to do. Cruz was great to start the season and hasn't really done much anything since. Sano, like we've talked about a lot, is not hitting the ball real well. Alex Kirilloff probably wakes up and hits 300. So I think there's, an opportunity for him if he's decent at first base. You could, like this year being different, you don't have to find 5 days for him to play to say, well, that way he's not missing his at-bats in the minor leagues. If you can get him 2 days a week, maybe 3, that I think would be enough. And he's going to make this lineup longer because it doesn't seem real long at this point. And he's by far out of that 3, in my opinion anyway, the most advanced hitter. And I think he could help the lineup in the right spot, and he won't be overwhelmed. And I don't think Larnach is really that far behind. Apparently in the Royce Lewis thing, he said that he's got a first base mitt too. So either of those guys for me could come up, and I don't think you need to find room for them like you would in a typical season.
No, I agree with that. Again, like you said, because they're not losing out on at bats somewhere else. I mean, they're losing out on live BP against other guys that are trying to get up there. I'd be good with any of them as well. I agree with Matthew, and that Rooker's interesting as being a left-handed potential corner outfielder who can also play first base. Kirilloff and Larnach to me are 1 and 1A, or 6 of one, half a dozen of the other. They're kind of the same players. So pick one and call them up. Of course, I'd also, if the question is who I'd rather see, I'd love to see Royce Lewis on the roster too, but that's not going to happen, I don't think, anytime soon. And we are all interested in Blankenhorn a couple days ago too. So, but last question here, Travis Z in the Q&A asks, I don't remember, but if there's going to be a trade deadline, what do you think the Twins go after? And again, this one can be fairly quick. There is a August 31st trade deadline. Let's start with Matthew. Do you expect the Twins to be active in that?
I don't really think the Twins are going to do much of anything. Again, what they would potentially do would be pick up a starting pitcher, but in this season, what starting pitchers are going to be available, who are going to be better than the options that you have on the team? I don't think there's any. Potentially they pick up a relief pitcher. I don't think they're going to do much of anything of impact like we saw last season.
Jeremy?
I'd be shocked if they made a deal, just because the only people eligible to be traded are the ones in the 60-man roster, and you either have like the quad A dudes or the top prospects. So if you're going to trade, which they wouldn't, Kirilloff, Larnach, Lewis, what's the return going to be on that for probably a month and a half rental? It just doesn't seem to make sense. And knowing how Felby and Levine operate, I don't even think they're probably talking to people because they do their due diligence, but would be shocked if they made any deal at all of significance before the deadline.
Nate, your thoughts?
Yeah, I think the same. I just don't know what's going to be available, especially that's going to really upgrade what we have right now. The only way something happens is if we hear that someone is just out for the year that really needs to be replaced, especially on kind of that starting pitching side maybe. I know people have floated the Cincinnati starters maybe as someone to go at, but beyond that, I don't know if there's much of anyone that really improves this roster right now the way it's constructed.
Yeah, and I think with 8 teams in each league making the playoffs, there's probably going to be about 10 teams in each league that are looking to add something, and those 4 or 5 other teams are going to be asking for the moon. And like Jeremy said, the guys that are at these 60-man rosters are either top prospects or guys that aren't going to interest teams. So I agree. I don't think it'll be busy, but I do think they'll be active. I think they'll make a lot of calls, and I think they'll try. It's just, which teams are going to be out of it and know that they're out of it. So with that, we've gone a little bit.
The Pirates.
What's that?
The Pirates. They're out of it. Everybody knows they're out of it. They're the only team. We watched the Pirates last week. How many guys off that roster do you want to give anything up for?
I don't know. Probably none of them.
Zero. None. There's not a player on that roster. Like, you want a pitcher? You're not calling the Pirates. Like, everybody else, except for the Cardinals, because they've only played 5 games, every other team in baseball has 6, 7, 8. They all have enough wins to be in contention. And so that's not going to change in a week and a half. So unless there's a team that's just going to sell out, which I don't know that there is, because everybody's got a chance. What's even the point? I think it's going to be a deadline that comes and goes, and no one even really thinks about it because teams just aren't going to be into trading.
Yeah.
Pineda, he'll be the trade deadline acquisition.
Yeah.
It's actually a really good
that'll
point. And, maybe Rich Hill is back by then and Homer Bailey, and all of a sudden they have too much pitching again, which was the concern at the beginning of the year. So with that, I appreciate you guys sticking around a little bit extra, as it typically with me goes a little bit longer because I love answering questions and making sure you all get your thoughts out there. So with that, I want to thank Nate Palmer, Matthew Taylor, Jeremy Nygard for joining tonight. I want to thank all of you who listened live. We even had our first person call in and be willing to ask questions and talk about his kid, but lots of other stuff as well. So feel free to do that. Now that you know somebody's done it, it's easy to do. Please feel free to do that. But if you missed this, you can find the recording of it either later tonight or tomorrow morning on the Twins Daily YouTube page, the Twins Daily Facebook page, the game recap from tonight's game. It's on iTunes now. It's on the Twins Daily podcast page. It's everywhere. So go to Postgame Pint, where we will have our next episode tomorrow night, or next show tomorrow night after the Twins series finishes in Milwaukee. I will be hosting again. I'll be joined by Ted Schwerzler, Cody Christie, and, if I can read my writing, Matt Braun. So be sure to join us then. Thanks again. For any questions you got, go to postgamepint.com. Thank you guys again, and have a great night, and hopefully we'll see some Twins wins soon. Have a good night.